Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And it feels like we go through this every few months. The drama, the frustration, there's always some particular issue, whether it's Marvel United, Dead Reckoning, Kemet, Ares Expedition. Sometimes I care, sometimes I'm invested, other times I don't, and this mostly is going to be one of those times that I don't. So let's give some context here for those who don't know what's currently going on. Do the long story short aspect of things. Long story short, Stronghold Games launched Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition on Kickstarter. They had a fairly successful Kickstarter, raising over $1 million, as one might imagine. It's the new, shorter version of Ares Expedition. In fact, I have a video that went up yesterday on the channel, or 2 days ago on the channel, comparing Terraforming Mars to Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, a playlist not that going over the two games. You'll have to watch that video to find out more. This has nothing to do with how good this game is or is not. So they had the Kickstarter. They promised a timeline of the Kickstarter is going to come and arrive in September, I believe it was. September 2021 was when you're going to get your game. They kind of had an update at one point saying that it will be earlier. It will come in June instead. So the game's ahead of schedule. It's going to arrive in June. And then from there, they had an update less than a week ago where they said, oh, by the way, we're super excited to announce that we now have a Target exclusive for this game. So Target is going to have the exclusive rights to selling Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition for some predetermined amounts of time. This is a common thing in the board game world, where sometimes Walmart, Target, Amazon, whoever, will sign an exclusive for a game. The biggest and most notorious of these is likely going to be when Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion was exclusive to Target for 6 months or something like that, before other companies, other stores could get their hands on it. And it's a general thing. It's great for the publisher, it's great for Target. It's a little frustrating for those of us who like to buy our games elsewhere, and usually involves a horde of board gamers trying to run down Target to get the game they want, if they care enough, all that kind of thing. The problem here is that, based on the update, there's also going to be a bit of delay in the Kickstarter version of the game, Ares Expedition, which means those people who back the game were going to have their game after Target got theirs. In other words, people spent a lot of money, not a lot of money, a decent amount of money, backing a game, supporting the project, bringing it to life, and one of the unspoken, implied benefits on Kickstarter is that you get your game early. Now, the key words here are unspoken and implied. There's no such guarantee in place, but people tend to assume that part of the reason they're backing the game, I assume this, by the way, to be very clear, when I backed Ares Expedition, I certainly assumed that I would be getting the game earlier than others. Now, the games are different. We'll come back to that shortly. Slight differences in the quality, what you're getting. But one of the unspoken implied benefits is getting the game early, and that means a lot of people who have supported the project are not getting their game early. And this wasn't done with a huge apology by Stronghold. It was done with a hey, Target exclusive edition, we're a little sorry about this, now be happy for us. It lacked an understanding or awareness of any sort of impact of what they were doing, which I think further added to the problem. Because then there's no polite way to say it, the whole storm, insert whatever over beforehand, the whole storm blew up. Because if you look at the Kickstarter comments on Ares Expedition, if you look at various Facebook threads, if you look at various Board Game Geek threads, people as a general whole are not happy about this. Now, it tends to range. I would say there's 3 camps. The largest camp, by far, is going to be the one you don't see. It's going to be people like myself who, I guess I'm putting out a video so it changes, but most people who would otherwise be like myself who just don't care enough to make it an issue or not. In general, whenever you have an issue, most people tend to fall in the category of just not caring enough, not doing anything about it. You just don't hear from them because they don't say anything. Then the next largest camp, which again, this goes to the threads you see, are going to people who range from frustrated to straight up livid to death threats, like insanity, death threats, we'll come back to that too, about the fact that that Stronghold did this. That they asked for their money, they deceived the backers. Again, they never committed to anything, but there certainly is a degree of deceit involved. There's certainly a degree of not telling people what's going on, of a lack of communication, of a lack of treating your backers like partners and instead treating them like a piggy bank. I certainly think that's there. And then the smallest camp. The smallest camp is going to be those who are aggressively defending Stronghold. And there are people who will aggressively defend them. I would argue most people who are defending Stronghold are not actually defending Stronghold so much as telling others to try to put their complaints and concerns in perspective. which I think is where I will fall in this video. I think Stronghold screwed up. We'll come back to that again during this video, but I think Stronghold screwed up. I think they treated their backers in a way that will incentivize others to not back. To a degree. Unfortunately, most people will still continue to back things and then complain after. That is unfortunately the reality of the way it works. I'm getting a whole bunch of alerts on my phone. But yeah, so Stronghold screwed up. Now this is going to be very similar to Marvel United. If you remember the situation with Marvel United, the original one, not the X-Men, Marvel United did the exact same thing. A little different though, a little different in terms of timing. They basically announced right when the campaign ended that this would be happening. And they gave you, the backer, the option to either cancel and refund your pledge entirely, fees and everything, or to potentially pay for split wave shipping. So also frustrating, but with more communication, post-campaign, but more communication. And then additionally, and a big gap over here, is the difference in products between Marvel United retail versus Marvel United Kickstarter was like this to this. Okay, huge difference. The difference between Stronghold retail and Stronghold Kickstarter, between Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, is this versus this. Okay, there is a difference, to be clear. And it's a difference that I think you'll prefer the Kickstarter version. I think you as a backer will be much happier with the Kickstarter version. So let's go ahead and take a tangent of covering those differences. So there's going to be 4 differences to Terraforming Mars retail and the Kickstarter. One is the full box art and spot UV. The Kickstarter version will have full box art, spot UV, making your copy unique. Speaking for myself, I don't care about boxes, not why I back games. Secondly, second option is going to be you're going to get cube trays in your Ares Expedition Kickstarter version. So you have cube trays to manage your cubes. It's a nice little extra. I think it has some value for sure. Because part of what we didn't talk about as well is not only are people going to get it from Target earlier, they're going to get it cheaper. Absolutely cheaper. With shipping and everything, I think this costs you roughly $50 on Kickstarter, depending on where you're from, how much you paid for shipping, all that stuff. But definitely a factor. And in Target, I don't know the official price, but it seems like it's going to be around $30 to $40 in Target, so you're getting it cheaper. But yeah, you get cube trays. That's nice. Number 3, you're going to get promo cards. 17 extra promo cards for the game. Certainly a nice perk. You'll almost certainly have the option of getting those on the Board Game Geek store later. So it's not something that's exclusive, but it's a nice perk. And then fourthly is you're going to get dual layer boards, which that, by the way, is a big deal. More than anything else, having played this game, you're absolutely going to want the dual layer boards. No different than its big brother before it. The boards that you're trying to track a ton of resources on just plain card stock, not a pleasant experience. So I believe you'll be happier with what you got. And this is the first point of the video, long enough into it. Which is, it's the same aspect, it's the same problem I pointed out when I did a video on Marvel United of why, when I defended CMON. And defending is the wrong word, because both with Stronghold and with CMON, I feel a lack of transparency, a lack of communication is treating your backers in a certain way in which they can and should treat you like a company where they only back things when it's worthwhile and never ever give you the time of day past that, because you haven't treated them the way you want to be treated. And so in both cases, I think the companies did not communicate. I think they did not treat their backers well. I think they are incentivizing a monetary-based relationship and not a community-based relationship, which is okay as far as I'm concerned. I don't mind acting in kind. But as far as you, the backer, as far as myself, the backer, you're getting what you're going to get. You're getting what you were told you're going to get. You're going to get it earlier than you were going to get it anyways. You're not getting anything less than what you were told. You're getting exactly what you purchased. But you're upset. You being a relative term, if you are or are not upset. You're upset because someone else is getting a potentially better deal. Someone else is getting it earlier. It is something we have to always put into perspective. If you're saying that I am happier, or I would be happier, if others simply couldn't get something, it feels a little shallow to me. It feels a little lacking in perspective of if you're happy with a lollipop and you're less happy because someone else got 2 lollipops, it means you're not looking at what you have, you're only looking at what others have. There's a degree of frustration, of betrayal, of being treated unfairly. There's something I talked about with Everdell as well, when they had the Everdell Collector Edition, on sale cheaper. It's a general idea of always focus on if you got what you were supposed to get, why are you upset that someone else potentially has a better deal, potentially has more? Don't focus on that. Now, I'm not saying to ignore that information. That is definitely not what I'm saying. I'm not saying to ignore the information. In fact, what I'm saying, more than that, in the case of Ares Expedition, you should 100% be just as happy, well, happier, you're getting a game sooner than you were otherwise going to, than we were going to be before. It shouldn't matter at all. But you should take these things into account in your future buying or backing decisions. That's absolutely true. I'm not telling you to stick your head in the sand. Remember that monetary relationship I just talked about that they're incentivizing when they treat you like a piggy bank? I think that's fair. I think the next time Stronghold has a Kickstarter, the next time they put up a game, you should look at that game and say, I can wait and get this in retail. Assuming you don't care about the extras. There will be extras. Enough to convince you, that's a different conversation. But there will be extras in that game. So, let these things that companies do, assuming they're giving you what you're supposed to get, and it's only a question of others, whether it's Marvel United, whether it's Everdell, whether it's Ares Expedition, whoever, whatever it is, whenever you're getting what you were going to get and you're only upset because someone else is getting it cheaper, let those things guide your future purchasing decisions. They absolutely should. But this brings us to the next point, and whatever number point we're up to. I think we as backers are very much part of the problem. I talked about this a long time ago. I did a video on why Kickstarter isn't a good deal anymore. And my final point in that video was the idea that Kickstarter is not a good deal because reasons X, Y, and Z. These are things taken into account. But the biggest problem I gave was us. Us as backers, as consumers. We continuously are so obsessed and absurd with the FOMO, with the fear of missing out, that we continuously end up getting and backing things that are a debatable deal at most, that are not necessarily worth it. And keep in mind, Stronghold Games told us this loud and clear in the Kickstarter. If you remember the Kickstarter, I don't know how much you do or don't remember, there's a whole lot of back and forth about the MSRP, the lack of communication and transparency about price, which eventually resulted in a FAQ update saying, why don't you answer questions about pricing? And it was like, well, we price things the way we believe they should be priced based on fairness and value and this and that. And if you don't feel that that's not worth it to you, then just don't get the game. And if you do get the game, you should be happy with it. And by the way, in general, if you're someone who likes to buy things on sale, then yeah, you'll probably get the game cheaper down the road, but without the promo cards, but you know, you should just be happy with it and back accordingly. Now, by the way, everything they're saying I think is fair to a degree. They treated the concerns and the backers dismissively in that update, which is a treatment that we are seeing in the same way they are communicating around this as well. Just the general dismissiveness and lack of caring about the people who are backing their game. And yet we'll continue to flock to them in droves. So not just Stronghold, to any company. I believe that when you back something, you need to start being concerned with the FOMO in both directions. The fear of missing out goes both ways, and we tend to only focus on one direction. The aspect of being concerned that what if I can't get it later? What if there are extras? What if this? What if that? Be concerned the other direction. What if it'll be cheaper at retail? What if it's not a good game? What if I don't actually end up playing it? We should be focusing on the FOMO in the other direction just as much. I love Kickstarter, to be very clear, I do, but it's expensive. And it's a place that when we put our money there, we should be comfortable with how our money is spent. We should be comfortable with the decision we're making. And it should be immaterial to whatever else the company does. Should it affect our future decisions? Of course it should. Anytime a company does something in terms of the future pricing, the future availability, an exclusive that's no longer exclusive, a revised sculpt to get around exclusivity, I pick and choose which ones of those I care about, and the ones that I do affect my future decisions. I have no regrets about backing this game. I backed Ares Expedition, and I said that when I backed it that I believed I was paying slightly more than I could have, than I needed to, slightly more than I particularly cared for. But for me, I love Terraforming Mars enough that I was willing to pay that extra little premium. I don't care about getting it early or not. I was willing to pay that little extra premium because I liked the game enough. And I stand by that decision. I was and am. Will I back the next Stronghold games? Well, honestly, if it's Terraforming Mars, I probably still will. I love the property enough. Will I back the next Stronghold games that isn't Terraforming Mars? Well, I'm less likely to do so. Any degree of FOMO I have around Title X that's new and potentially good, but I don't know anything about, I now have a bit more of a framework around how Stronghold Games operates on Kickstarter, about how they are going to price or have deals or anything else after the fact. And so my FOMO, wherever that line is or isn't, has slightly shifted. But again, we're part of the problem. As long as you are someone, and this is when I am speaking to you, whoever you might be, as long as you are someone who is complaining about the situation, if you complained about the MSRP when it was on Kickstarter, if you back the game despite that, and now you're seeing it at Target and you're complaining, and you're going to go ahead and back the next game from Stronghold Games, then what do you want? What do you want them to do? You're giving them no reason to do things differently. You are continuously giving them your money and your time and your attention, and you're helping and supporting them. You're complaining, but it's not changing anything. You should always vote with your wallet. It's the most effective way to do things. But all that aside, I do want to end on something that's worth mentioning. And this is a quote from someone on Board Game Geek in one of the many threads that popped up. This, in the end, benefits us all. The more people who get into the hobby board gaming, the more people we will have to play with, as well as with board game publishers who have bigger budgets to create the games we love. Again, this, in the end, benefits us all. I believe that's true. I believe it's frustrating to see things that you thought you were getting early, and it's not early. I do. But understand that having 100,000 copies of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition in Target is going to generally be good for the hobby. It expands the space we're playing in. It expands the people we are playing with. It opens up the door for others. Doesn't mean you should back the next Stronghold games. That's up to you. Back or don't, but let this entire conversation guide you in some direction. But ultimately, what's happening right now is still good for the hobby. It's still good for you. It's still good for me. It's good for Stronghold games, at least in the short run. It's good for Target. I mean, no one's boycotting Target over this. It's just another of many, many incidents that will be forgotten over time and likely won't affect the number of people who back the next Stronghold games. Kickstarter. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.